Part 3. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 21. The darkness fell, and the night wind was blowing gently. A young man dressed in black came in the night, and walked up the steps lightly. His slender figure entered the palace as agile as a leopard, and reported respectfully. The sixth princess signaled Feng Jinzi to stabilize His Highness, and asked him to take the initiative to show goodwill to His Highness in order to regain His Highness's favor for him. The words were concise and to the point, without any extra nonsense. Chu Qinghuang was sitting in front of the window reading a book. Hearing this, he said calmly, "Are they gone?" "Yes." Chu Qinghuang raised the corner of her mouth imperceptibly. She really came and left as she said, and really treated the princess's mansion as their backyard. She raised her eyes and looked at the young shadow guard, raised her hand and waved, "Come here." Fu Kang stepped forward quickly and knelt in front of Chu Qinghuang. This time, Chu Qinghuang did not correct his kneeling action, but lightly ordered, "Stretch out your hand." Fu Kang did it without resistance. Chu Qinghuang pinched his wrist, which made Fu Kang stiffen unnoticeably. It was a fatal mistake for a martial artist to have his pulse controlled. If the other party wanted to kill him, he would not even have room to resist. However, this person was his master. Fu Kang lowered his eyes, forcing himself to relax his tense nerves, and his back bent down with his head lowered, showing a respectful and docile posture. Chu Qinghuang carefully felt his pulse with her fingertips, and after a moment, she let go of his wrist. "Go wash up, there is no other task tonight, go to bed early." "Yes." Fu Kang got up and left. Chu Qinghuang sat alone for a while, got up and walked to the inner room and lay down on the bed. Although it was dark outside, it was far from time to go to bed. However, she had just arrived here and could not accept many things too quickly. She needed to think more during her free time. There is no problem with the emperor now. As long as the problem of the treasury and tribute is solved, the eldest princess Chu Qinghuang will become the most trustworthy person in front of the emperor. No matter how violent she is, she will do her own thing, or how many unorthodox things she does, the emperor will tolerate her. After all, compared to tolerating a princess's temper, the stability of the country is obviously 100 times more important. As the eldest princess in charge of the secret cabinet, Chu Qinghuang has the confidence to be arrogant and domineering. As for the interest disputes among the concubines in the palace, the disputes among the princes for the throne, and the party disputes among the court officials and dignitaries, they can all be left for later. Chu Qinghuang suddenly remembered something. It seems that there are still a few servants in her backyard who have not come out to meet. Chu Qinghuang has taken in 4 handsome young men in the past 2 years, and she stopped this ridiculous behavior until she met Feng Jinzi, but she did not propose to send those who had already entered the mansion away, and Feng Jinzi did not mention it either. Such a big thing happened in the mansion yesterday and today. The most favored son-in-law was beaten with a stick and punished to kneel. None of the servants came out to watch the fun? Chu Qinghuang was thinking, and there was a slight sound of footsteps in the outer hall. She turned her head and saw Fu Kang coming back from washing and lying on the brocade couch in the outer hall with his clothes on. This young man has a very high level of cultivation. Normally, he can come and go without a trace, as silent as a shadow at night. However, when he is alone with Chu Qinghuang in the bedroom, he will consciously release a little breath, and the footsteps will not be completely hidden, but controlled within the range that Chu Qinghuang can detect but will not disturb her. Chu Qinghuang retracted her sight and lay flat on the bed. Her eyes fell on the curtain embroidered with complicated phoenix patterns above. Tonight is probably the earliest night that Chu Qinghuang and Fu Kang go to bed. Chu Qinghuang was awakened by a series of strange noises at night. The noises were not loud and separated by a screen, so ordinary people might not be able to hear them. However, Chu Qinghuang was a martial artist, so the slight noises were enough to wake her up. There was a light on in the inner hall. She stood up and looked outside the hall, and found that the noises came from the direction of the brocade couch. Chu Qing Huang was suspicious and walked out of the hall. She suddenly found that the young shadow guard who was sleeping in his clothes was shivering constantly. Cold. Chu Qing Huang frowned and subconsciously turned her head to look at the window. The carved window was closed, and no night wind blew in. Moreover, she looked down at herself. She was wearing a thin nightgown after taking a bath, and she didn't feel very cold. It was late spring and early summer. The temperature at night was not as high as that during the day, but the temperature difference was not large. For a strong warrior, it was not so cold that he would shiver. Chu Qing Huang stood for a moment and found that the boy's lips were frozen white, and his body curled up unconsciously, which was obviously not a disguise. Chu Qing Huang pondered in his heart, turned around and walked to the window, knocked on the window very lightly, and saw that the boy who was lying on the brocade couch and trembling constantly suddenly shuddered, like a ghost in the night, and jumped up in an instant, rushed to the window like lightning, and almost broke through the window until Chu Qing Huang's gorgeous and noble face suddenly appeared in his sight. The action of breaking the window stopped abruptly. Fu Kang's hands had even made a killing move. When he was close, he could even clearly see the ruthless murderous intent in his eyes. However, when he saw Chu Qing Huang, these turned into respect and obedience in an instant, and his eyes returned to calm. Fu Kang knelt down silently. "Get up." Fu Kang stood up. Chu Qing Huang looked at his face. The unusual paleness just now was gone. Fu Kang looked no different from the daytime, as if the trembling just now was her illusion. Turning around and sitting in front of the couch, Chu Qing Huang said, "Have you been poisoned?" Fu Kang raised his eyes were confused for a moment, and then he slowly shook his head. "I don't know." "Don't know?" Chu Qing Huang frowned. "Will there be abnormal reactions that make you feel uncomfortable from time to time?" Fu Kang looked confused. "No. No." Chu Qing Huang frowned. "That was really weird." "Go back to sleep." Chu Qing Huang took a blanket from the cupboard and gave it to him. "Take this." Fu Kang was startled, staring at the blanket thrown into his hands, and lowered his head helplessly. "I dare not." "Take it if I ask you to use it." "Yes." Chu Qing Huang lay down on the bed again, and the way the original owner and Fu Kang got along with each other in the past emerged in his mind. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 22. The original owner was a skilled martial artist, and there were many skilled guards in the princess's mansion, so she didn't need the shadow guard's personal protection. The only reason she asked Fu Kang to come was to torture him. Chu Qing Huang was a person who couldn't be reasoned with. She could drag Fu Kang out for any reason and beat him up, no matter whether the reason was reasonable or not, and no matter whether Fu Kang was deliberately framed. In normal times, even if he was seriously injured, Fu Kang was not eligible for preferential treatment. Most of the time, he was either hiding on the beam or in the corner behind the curtain. The original owner Chu Qing Huang didn't care whether he was seriously injured or not, or whether his wound hurt. Even when resting, he was in a highly alert environment, and it was difficult to sleep well. That is, the shadow guards from the dark pavilion were strong and used to all kinds of hardships, otherwise it would be difficult for them to live to the age of 20. Chu Qing Huang's eyes narrowed slightly, and when he was about to close his eyes, he suddenly felt the slight strange sound coming again. She frowned, turned her head to look at the brocade couch outside the screen, listened quietly for a while, and confirmed that it was the same as before. She got up and walked out. The boy was lying on the brocade couch, curled up in the blanket, but still shivering uncontrollably, looking like he was in the cold winter, shivering in the ice and snow. Chu Qing Huang frowned deeply, and couldn't help but put out her hand to test his forehead. The boy was suddenly awakened, grabbed Chu Qing Huang's hand like lightning, and was about to use a killing move, but when his eyes touched Chu Qinghuang's eyebrows, he quickly withdrew his hand and knelt on the ground with a bang. Chu Qinghuang didn't say anything, and stared at the top of his head in silence. The forehead that her fingertips touched just now was as cold as ice, without any temperature. Chu Qinghuang was really puzzled. The boy who was fine during the day, no, it should be said that he was extremely normal when he was awake, but he was as cold as ice when he fell asleep. What on earth is going on? Are you cold? She asked calmly. Fu Kang was slightly startled, then lowered his eyebrows and said, "Master, I am not cold." Chu Qinghuang thought for a while, "Go to sleep on my bed." The young man froze, "I dare not. You have forgotten what I said." Fu Kang's face changed slightly, remembering what she said yesterday about unconditional obedience to orders. Even though he knew it was against the rules, he had no room to resist. "Yes." Chu Qinghuang turned and walked back. This time she just leaned against the head of the bed, not lying down, but quietly looking at Fu Kang. Fu Kang was obviously facing such a situation for the first time. His steps were stiff and his expression was at a loss. He looked like he was being forced into prostitution. "You can use my quilt." Fu Kang unconsciously clenched his hands. It was the end of spring, and there was no chill even at night. Ordinary people didn't need to cover themselves thickly, not to mention that he was a shadow with strong martial arts. Even though there was only a thin quilt on the bed, Chu Qinghuang quietly watched the little shadow guard's tangled and embarrassed expression. Somehow, she suddenly found it interesting. Her years of loneliness and coldness had unconsciously changed, and her voice unconsciously became a little more careless and lazy. "Do you need me to hold you?" Fu Kang was shocked and dared not delay any longer. He took off his shoes and lay down on the bed neatly. Chu Qinghuang said, "Go a little inside." Fu Kang moved stiffly to the inside. His expression was pale, and only a pair of dark eyes looked at Chu Qinghuang uneasily, but he soon realized that such a look was also disrespectful, and hurriedly closed his eyes to show respect. Chu Qinghuang raised her eyebrows. She suddenly found that this little shadow guard was quite interesting. Normally, he had no emotional fluctuations, was calm and indifferent, and was not affected by anything in the outside world, but this reaction at this time was really beyond her expectation. He was much more interesting than Feng Jinzi, the man who was inconsistent on the outside. Chu Qinghuang pulled the quilt over and threw it to him. "Cover yourself." Fu Kang pulled the quilt stiffly. Although he was not cold at all, he could not disobey the master's order. After being woken up several times tonight, Chu Qinghuang's sleepiness was completely gone, and Fu Kang's reaction after falling asleep always made her feel strange. She wanted to observe more, so she said lightly, "Sleep." Fu Kang responded. His whole body was stiff as a stone, and he closed his eyes tremblingly. Chu Qinghuang did not sleep or move, just leaning against the head of the bed and watching, naturally did not miss the trembling eyelashes, a completely different contrast from the strong and fierce shadow guard during the day, which aroused some strange interest in Chu Qinghuang's heart. Time passed little by little. Chu Qinghuang did not move, and Fu Kang, who was lying flat on the bed, put his hands flat on his abdomen, sleeping in a very well-behaved posture, completely lost the usual vigilance of the shadow guard, and the initial stiff posture slowly relaxed with the light sleep that soon came. When his eyelashes stopped trembling, Chu Qinghuang knew that he was really asleep. The training of the shadow guards was harsh. Years of inhuman training had long made them accustomed to being on guard even when sleeping. Moreover, the shadow guards did not have a completely comfortable diet and rest environment. In addition to irregular diet, they did not have soft beds to sleep. Most of the time, they were either hanging on the beams, hiding in trees, or hiding in a quiet corner. This irregular diet and rest is extremely harmful to the body, so the lifespan of the shadow guards is usually very short. Chu Qinghuang frowned slightly, and was thinking about entering into a trance, but saw that Fu Kang's body began to shrink slowly again. The thin blanket was wrapped around him like a cocoon, but he still looked cold, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Chu Qinghuang frowned again. This symptom was really strange. Even though she was well informed, she had never seen such a strange thing. She decided to find a doctor to take his pulse and check his physical condition after dawn. Chu Qinghuang was thinking deeply, but she saw the silkworm pupa wrapped in a quilt moving towards her little by little. She didn't know if it was subconsciously looking for warmth. Not long after, it stretched out its hand from the quilt and hugged Chu Qinghuang's waist tightly. Chu Qinghuang's eyes narrowed slightly, and her eyes fell on her waist. She looked at it expressionlessly and didn't move for a long time. If she was not sure that he would not remember anything after waking up, Chu Qinghuang would definitely suspect that he did it on purpose. However, her eyes fell on Fu Kang's gradually calming body, and she couldn't help wondering, he wouldn't feel cold if he hugged her to sleep. She was more useful than quilts and blankets. If she woke him up now, would he be scared to death because of her rude and offensive behavior, and then kneel on the ground to apologize again? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 23. Chu Qinghuang didn't sleep all night. He just sat on the bedside and was held by the little shadow guard and slept all night. He also observed the little shadow guard all night long. Then she came to 3 conclusions. First, Fu Kang's body stopped shivering when he held her, probably because her body was better heated than the quilt. Second, his body is cold when he sleeps. If it is summer, it should be very comfortable to sleep with him in his arms. The whole body will be cool, and even ice cubes are no longer needed, but if it is winter. Chu Qinghuang frowned. This palace probably needs more charcoal fire. Thirdly, if she touched him even slightly, his wariness as a warrior would be awakened immediately, and he would enter a state of alertness and chill. However, he hugged her and slept all night without realizing that such behavior was illegal. If Chu Qinghuang hadn't been able to hear what he was saying, he would have almost couldn't help but wonder if all of this was due to man-made calculations. But judging from his reaction, it probably wasn't the case. At dawn, Fu Kang opened his eyes after a good night's sleep. His consciousness was still dazed for a moment. It wasn't because he was derelict in his duties, but because as the most powerful shadow guard, he had almost never slept so deeply. However, this daze only lasted for a very short time. When he saw his hands tightly holding his master's slender waist, his face turned pale. In the next moment, he flew away from the bed like lightning and knelt on the ground obediently. This subordinate deserves to die. Chu Qinghuang stood up without saying a word, stretched his body that was stiff and numb after not moving all night, and said in a calm tone, "Did you sleep soundly while holding me in your arms?" Fu Kang pursed his lips tightly and did not dare to raise his head. He still said the same sentence, "This subordinate deserves to die." "Forget it." Chu Qinghuang rubbed her waist, turned around and walked out. "Wait for me to wash up." "Yes." The maid on duty quickly became busy. Jinlan led the people to serve in an orderly manner. Those who brought water were served, and those who combed their hair were combed. Minjia ordered people to start preparing breakfast. After Fu Kang drank the morning decoction, when Chu Qinghuang came out of the palace, he unexpectedly saw Feng Jinzi standing at the foot of the stone steps outside the palace. Although she heard Fu Kang report Feng Jinzi's plan last night, she still didn't expect that he would be waiting outside the palace early in the morning with his body still recovering from serious injuries. The guard stood beside him uneasily, ready to catch his young master who was so weak that he fainted. Qinghuang Feng Jinzi looked at Chu Qinghuang with burning eyes. "I have something to tell you." Chu Qinghuang's eyes fell on his face and he looked at it casually. Feng Jinzi's appearance was naturally handsome, but against the pale and frail complexion, there was an unreasonable aura that made people feel distressed. It's a pity that the current Chu Qinghuang has a heart of stone, does not have the same tendency to be abused as the original owner, and has no interest at all in a man who has a beautiful appearance but is surrounded by bad things. What do you want to say? Her voice was cold, revealing the indifference of someone who was thousands of miles away. I came here early in the morning. It seems that I can't wait, but you seem to have forgotten where this is, and you have forgotten your identity. Feng Jin froze. In this mansion, I am the only master. Chu Qinghuang's eyes suddenly turned cold. Don't you know how to salute me when you see me? Feng Jinzi's expression changed suddenly, and she tried her best to suppress the anger rising in her heart. She couldn't help but cursed a bitch in her heart, then forced herself to lower her eyes, and finally began to show weakness. It was my fault before, Your Highness, could you please stop following me? I just care. Chu Qinghuang's face was expressionless. Your Highness seems to have become a different person in the past 2 days. Feng Jinzi covered her mouth with her fist and coughed lowly, then looked at Chu Qinghuang sadly, with a hint of questioning in her tone. Has Your Highness fallen in love with you, other people? Is this the first time the evil person files a complaint? Chu Qinghuang's eyes were filled with mockery. I didn't understand emotions before, and I didn't mean to let down His Highness. Feng Jinzi lowered her eyes and made a gesture of repentance. I was just slow and wanted to use a special way to get His Highness's attention and make His Highness like me more. It was only later that I realized I had used the wrong method. As he spoke, he lowered his posture more and more. Your Highness, can you give me another chance? Fukang. Chu Qinghuang tilted her head and asked, do you believe what he said? Fukang stood beside Chu Qinghuang and replied with lowered eyebrows, I don't believe it. At this moment, the familiar voice sounded again, scumbag. Scumbag. Chu Qinghuang looked up at the sky and frowned. Where did this voice come from? Your Highness. Feng Jinzi pursed her lips and glanced at Fukang with disdain. He is just a shadow guard with a low status. Your Highness used to hate him the most. Why today? Do you suspect that he gave me ecstasy? Chu Qinghuang's words were ironic, but after hearing this, Feng Jinzi nodded firmly. It's very possible. Chu Qinghuang looked at him and was speechless. Scumbag. Although she didn't fully understand what these 2 words meant, she could now imagine that Feng Jinzi fit the description of stupid man very well. If there is nothing serious about your health, go back to Wutong Garden and pack your things. Chu Qinghuang said calmly, I will send someone to deliver the divorce letter to you in the afternoon. Leave with the divorce letter as soon as possible. Don't stay here to hinder me. Feng Jinzi's face froze. Chu Qinghuang. He has been so humbled, and this bitch is still not satisfied. Chu Qinghuang's face suddenly turned cold. Kneel down. As soon as Feng Jinzi finished speaking, he heard the wind passing by his ears, and his knee pit was kicked hard. Bang! Ah! The severe pain hit him, and Feng Jinzi was kicked to his knees without warning, just like yesterday. The pain of his knees seemed to be broken, which made his eyes black, his face pale, and cold sweat quickly broke out on his forehead. Young master, the guard was shocked and squatted down to support him. Young master, are you okay? Feng Jinzi's face was distorted with pain, and he couldn't say a word. Chu Qinghuang raised his eyebrows slightly, glanced at Fukang who returned to his side. His eyes were slightly deep, but he said nothing, and turned away. Bitch, bitch. Is this the only sentence you can say after scolding? The son of a noble family who looks gentle and noble is actually just an uneducated playboy. It's just that his father's identity has packaged him, and he himself only fits the evaluation of being a rotten rag. Feng Jinzi knelt down and fainted again. Since the eldest son of the Feng family entered the princess's mansion, he has lived a life of superiority, with unlimited glory and high status. No one in the princess's mansion dares to offend him. Feng Jinzi is more like a master than Chu Qinghuang, the real master. However, in the past 2 days, he seemed to have suddenly been unlucky. He was either beaten with a stick or punished to kneel. He hit a wall in front of Chu Qinghuang again and again. Not only did everyone in the princess's mansion know that he had fallen out of favor, but even the few servants in the backyard who had always been obedient showed a rare expression of surprise after hearing that Feng Jinzi had hit a wall one after another. Has the princess suddenly come to her senses? A young man in white clothes leaned on a bench by the railing, crossed his legs, shook his head and said, "It seems that the sun has risen from the west." Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 24. A young man in a red shirt sat diagonally across the beauty's back, leisurely throwing fish food into the lake, watching the scene of large koi fish competing for food, and said casually, "The situation in the Ziki court is about to change." The sky in the court has changed. The man in white held his chin and said thoughtfully, "Is the Emperor Phoenix awakening?" Behind a long pear tree table opposite, a man in a cloud-colored light robe is elegantly cooking tea. His posture is as pleasing to the eye as flowing water. He seems to have not heard the conversation between the man in white and the boy in red. Maybe the boy in red shirt threw down all the fish food and clapped his hands. It's not fun if there are too few people. I think we should get a few more beautiful boys to come to the princess's house to compete for favors with these koi. Look at them, how fun they are. The man in white raised his eyes and looked at him. "Do you think your life is too long?" "No, I think life is too boring." The young man in red touched his face. "With a face as beautiful as mine, a rare and beautiful young man in the world must be favored, but what does special favor mean? It's brought out by the crowd, you know. I have to have a crowd, otherwise how can I be special? I think Feng Jinzi is special enough. He has been beaten or made to kneel for the past 2 days. Doesn't he win the special favor of the eldest princess?" "Him," the boy in red curled his lips and sneered, "I feel dirty even if you carry my shoes." "Mother Wu is here." The young man in white suddenly turned his head and looked at the figure walking on the bluestone path in the distance. She must have been ordered to come. Since they entered the palace, no one has cared about their life or death, and no one has deliberately made things difficult for them. The 4 of them are like invisible men, occupying the position of serving the emperor in vain, but they have never had the opportunity to go to the princess. Fight for favor. Aunt Wu suddenly came over, obviously not because she was bored. Young Master Qi, Young Master Wen, and Young Master Hongyu Aunt Wu came alone to the west courtyard where the 4 servants lived. When she saw the 3 of them chatting and passing the time, she did not show any strange expressions. She just said respectfully, "Elder Princess, His Highness has ordered that the 4 young masters go to Dongshang Pavilion for dinner tonight." There was silence in the flower hall. Hongyu slowly turned to look at her, along with Her Highness the Princess. Aunt Wu said in a business-like tone, "I am only responsible for conveying the orders of Her Royal Highness the Princess. If you have any questions, you can ask Your Highness yourself." After saying this, she raised her eyes and looked around the flower hall, then said in hindsight, "Master Shen isn't there." Aunt Wu quickly said, "Please let the 3 young masters tell Mr. Shen." Hongyu raised his eyebrows, "What if I don't want to tell him?" "Then when His Highness becomes angry, the 4 young masters will definitely suffer together." Aunt Wu's expression remained unchanged and her tone was extremely calm. "Young masters, please prepare." After saying this, she turned around and left, obviously not wanting to stay any longer. Tisk Hongyu sneered, "Have you noticed that the servants of the princess mansion are very good at protecting themselves wisely? In addition to conveying orders, keep as far a distance as possible and never create any excuse that might anger Her Highness the Princess. This is also the reason why they have always been able to relax. After all, Chu Qing Huang really doesn't have an easy temper. He didn't know when he bumped into her hand, and his skin would peel off even if he died. Therefore, except for Feng Jin, who was particularly favored at the beginning, there are really not many others in this mansion. They use their power to bully others, flatter others, and suppress others, and no one comes over to get close to them at will. Each of them keeps a safe distance and sense of proportion, and will never go too far easily. Isn't it good for Mingj to protect himself? The man in the cloud-colored light robe placed 4 teacups on the table and poured the brewed tea into the teacups. His voice was always leisurely and comfortable. We have saved ourselves a lot of trouble. The man in white raised a leg and kicked Hong Yu. You are responsible for getting Zhong Jin back. Hong Yu was dissatisfied. Why should I go? Because you are the youngest. Hong Yu was dissatisfied. What's wrong with your young age? You should listen to your brother when you are young. Don't you understand what politeness is? The man in white is not only handsome, but also looks harmless with a smile on his lips. Especially when he looks at the boy in red with a smile, his eyes are so gentle that he seems to be the most considerate brother in the world. However, when Hong Yu caught a glimpse of his expression at this time, she suppressed all the dissatisfaction in her heart and snorted coldly, "Just go." The man in white raised his hand and touched his head, "Be good." The Ang shadow guards are very effective in their work. From the time they were sent out at noon yesterday to investigate the evidence of corruption by the Minister of Household Affairs, it has only been 12 hours today at noon, and the investigation has already yielded great results. Chu Qing Huang looked at the pieces of evidence before him and casually flipped through the huge accounts in the account book, his eyebrows as cold as frost. Sure enough, we should start from the Minister of Household Affairs. Hong Qinjai, the Secretary of the Ministry of Revenue, is the capable minister of Feng Gaifei's party. He supports the third Prince Chu Tianyin. He is in charge of the financial power of the Ministry of Revenue. This position is enough for Chu Tianyin to have no worries about money. The emptiness of the treasury does not mean that the Secretary of the Ministry of Revenue will become poor. He has many ways to line his own pockets. The prince vying for the crown prince secretly needs to maintain capable ministers, staff, and dead men, manage various forces, and even recruit troops quietly. Without money, everything is in vain. That's why concubine Duan couldn't wait for Chu Qing Huang to get rid of the Minister of Household Affairs so that the Ling family could take over. Chu Qing Huang sat in the chair, holding her chin and thinking, Fuxing Kang. Exist. Who do you think is suitable to take over the Ministry of Finance after the Minister of the Ministry of Finance has his house confiscated and is accused? Fu Kang was silent for a moment. Second Master Ling. Chu Qing Huang looked up at him. What if I don't want him to take office? Fu Kang only gave this answer based on the premise that she was the daughter of concubine Duan, but in fact, Chu Qing Huang was not interested in planning for others, even if that person was the original owner's blood brother. Ling's uncle Ling Ankan already holds part of the military power of Ziki. If Ling Anja is allowed to sit in the position of Minister of Revenue, then there is no need to fight for the throne. The emperor can just abdicate and let Chu Tianzheng ascend the throne. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 25. Don't you want Ling Anja to take over? Fu Kang was slightly startled, not knowing how to answer for a moment. Chu Qing Huang didn't really want to ask his opinion. Fu Kang was just a shadow guard. Even if he was very skilled in martial arts, he had no right to interfere with matters in the court. Moreover, things like political intrigue were not suitable for shadow guards. Your Highness Nanny Wu stood outside the palace and reported, Miss Feng sent someone to deliver an invitation, saying that a flower viewing banquet will be held in the mansion tomorrow, and His Highness is invited to come over to enjoy the flowers and have tea. Chu Qing Huang raised her eyes and saw that Nanny Wu was indeed holding an exquisite hairpin invitation in her hand, but flower viewing and tea? Feng Wan, you can't sit still now? Chu Qing Huang raised her hand to signal, and Fu Kang silently walked over to take the invitation and handed it to Chu Qing Huang respectfully. Mother Wu turned and left. Chu Qing Huang glanced at the beautiful-looking invitation and put it aside, but her mind was still thinking about who was most suitable to take over the position of Minister of Household Affairs. Master Fu Kang suddenly spoke, with a hesitant tone, "There is a young master in the backyard." Huh? Chu Qing Huang looked up at him, surprised that he hesitated to speak. "What?" Wen Zhan Fu Kang bowed his head and replied, "His father Wen Xingyun is the left minister of the Ministry of Household Affairs and supports the fifth prince, so he has always been at odds with Hong Qingjai." Chu Qing Huang was silent. "So what? If the master does not have a suitable candidate for minister for the time being, you can let Wen Xingyun sit in this position first." Fu Kang pursed his lips, lowered his head and knelt down. "My subordinates have exceeded the rules, please punish me. The Shadow Guard's duty is only to protect the master, and they have no power to interfere with the master's decision-making. Violators will be severely punished." Chu Qing Huang looked at him silently for a moment, thoughtfully asking, "What is Wen Xingyun's ability?" "Mediocre ability." Chu Qing Huang said, "In that case, tell me your reasons." "The Wen family has a legitimate son, Wen Li, and a concubine, Wen Zhan. Wen Zhan's knowledge and arithmetic are hundreds of times better than Wen Li's. When the master no longer needs Wen Xingyun, he can eradicate them and leave only Wen Zhan for the master's use." Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows, not expecting Fu Kang to have such careful thoughts. It is not impossible for a bastard from an aristocratic family to be better than a legitimate son. After all, in addition to his father, half of the reason why a child is smart depends on his mother and whether he is motivated. But there is no doubt that the status of a concubine is definitely not as good as that of a legitimate son, and his influence in the family is weak. If the concubine is not welcomed by his father, then the influence can be said to be almost non-existent. So even if the family is wiped out in the future, there is no need to worry about him killing the owner for revenge. Of course, he probably doesn't have the ability to kill the owner. What's the relationship between Wen Zhan and his father? The Wen family only recognizes one son, the legitimate son Wen Li. Fu Kang lowered his head and said, "The reason why Wen Zhan was favored by the master in the first place was because of Wen Li's deliberate design. He wanted to use Wen Zhan in exchange for the master's influence on the Wen family. I didn't expect that Wen Zhan was not favored in the princess palace, but Feng Jinzi became the consort." The supporter's expression was slightly tense, and he respectfully apologized, "This subordinate has overstepped his bounds." Chu Qing Huang looked at him with playful eyes. Wen Zhan should be an available role, but what made her feel even better was that the little shadow guard next to her was obviously not a dull person. For a moment, Chu Qing Huang wanted to hear his true thoughts and whether he was hiding any secrets, but soon, she decided to give up this plan for the time being. If there is really a secret about Fu Kang, then the process of uncovering this secret bit by bit must be extremely interesting. With this idea in mind, Chu Qing Huang decided to pay close attention to the man named Wen Zhan while having dinner. An afternoon passed in the dormitory. The emperor's canonization of Chu Qing Huang as the eldest princess aroused the attention of the entire imperial city family, especially the princes and the courtiers behind them, who were almost shocked. After the shock, restlessness follows. Chu Qing Huang's proposal to confiscate the house in front of the emperor has aroused the opposition and dissatisfaction of all the ministers. Many people went to the emperor to persuade him, but the emperor ignored them. Instead, a decree of canonization directly gave Chu Qing Huang greater power. This undoubtedly, it fueled Chu Qing Huang's arrogance and deepened the panic of the ministers. At present, all major princes are urgently thinking of countermeasures to prepare for the situation in advance. But these have nothing to do with Chu Qing Huang. At dinner time, Minjiao and Jinlan came in to ask for instructions for dinner. Chu Qinghuang pondered for a moment, place it in the waterside pavilion of the East Pavilion. Don't forget to inform Feng Jinzi. Yes. When Minjiao sent someone to deliver Chu Qinghuang's instructions to Wutong courtyard, the servant beside Feng Jinzi was happy for a while. Her Highness the Princess seems to like the young master. Before he finished speaking, he turned around and met Feng Jinzi's cold eyes. The boy's expression changed. Mr. Master. What's wrong? The princess took the initiative to invite. Isn't this a good thing? You are stupid. The maid Qingxia kicked him out. The young master is injured and it is difficult to walk, but the princess lets the young master go to the water pavilion to have dinner. Isn't this intentional to torture the young master? Moreover, he invited so many servants to accompany him. Who knows if he deliberately wanted to humiliate the young master in front of everyone? The young man understood immediately. Then, what should we do? Master, should we go or not? Qingxia frowned. The princess ordered, how can the consort not go? At this juncture, if the consort really dares to go against her will, there's no telling what that inhuman lunatic will do again. Qingxia's face darkened, and she turned around and went into the room to serve Feng Jinzi. Sir Qingxia walked to the bedside and frowned worriedly. Seventh princess is too much. She asked you to go to the flower hall even though she knew you were injured. Isn't she deliberately torturing you? Feng Jinzi didn't say anything. He lay on the bed silently, his face as cold as ice. Sir Qingxia saw that he didn't move, and reminded him softly, although the seventh princess shouldn't do that, since you have been ordered, you should get up and change your clothes. Feng Jinzi turned his head to look at her. Did Chu Yuling leave you here to take care of me or to monitor my actions? Qingxia's face changed slightly. What are you talking about, sir? The sixth princess really likes you. Why would she let me monitor you? Really like? Feng Jinzi lowered his eyes to hide the emotional fluctuations in his eyes. He might have thought that Chu Yuling really liked him before, but now. Half an hour later, Chu Qinghuang changed into light clothes and walked towards the waterside flower hall with Fu Kang. Passing through the winding corridor, there are gardens and green plants all the way, with unique scenery. The flower hall built by the lake is spacious and cool, and there is a bit of moisture in the air. The dark curtain gradually enveloped, the light was dim, and the maids in the flower hall had already lit the lights. A mahogany 8 immortal table was placed in the middle of the flower hall, and 2 maids stood in each of the 4 corners of the flower hall. Outside the flower hall, the water was gurgling, and the night breeze was blowing, revealing a refreshing feeling. Chu Qinghuang saw from a distance that there were several young men standing under the pavilion corridor, wearing white clothes, blue shirts, cloud robes, and red skirts. They were all men with outstanding appearances. Whether it was their appearance, demeanor, or dress, they were all unique and beautiful. When Chu Qinghuang came closer, except for a few people who bowed their heads and saluted, greetings to Her Royal Highness the Princess. Stand up, Chu Qinghuang said, and walked into the flower hall without stopping, and sat down on the main seat. I haven't seen you for several months, and my memory is not very good. Please tell me your identity and name. The flower hall was suddenly quiet. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 26. The men on the corridor walked into the flower hall one by one. The first one to come in was Wen Zhan. who was dressed in a cloud-colored robe that was elegant and outstanding. After entering the flower hall, he bowed respectfully again. Wen Zhan, the bastard of the Wen family, greets Her Royal Highness the Princess. Chu Qinghuang's eyes fell on his face and she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Bastard of the Wen family. With such a demeanor, she really didn't believe that he was the bastard of the Wen family. After bowing, Wen Zhan lowered his eyes and stood aside. He was respectful and noble. He didn't seem to notice Chu Qinghuang's scrutiny of him. Well, even if he noticed, he just pretended not to know. I heard that you are well educated. Wen Zhan was slightly stunned. Her Royal Highness the Princess cared about his knowledge. Shouldn't she be most concerned about what he wore today and whether his appearance suited her eyes? Chu Qinghuang's mouth twitched, and she took a sip of the teacup. Sorry, she had no interest in his appearance or dress. My knowledge is okay. Wen Zhan was as humble as possible, even with a cautious attitude. Thank you for the compliment, Princess. I didn't compliment you, Chu Qinghuang said. Next. This tone is like an emperor selecting a beauty. Qi Ling silently complained in his heart. Qi Ling, dressed in a flowing white robe, seemed a little bolder than Wen Zhan. After entering the flower hall, he dared to look up, but when his eyes met Chu Qinghuang's, he quickly lowered his eyes and said respectfully, Qi Ling, the bastard of the Qi family, greets the princess. Bastard of the Qi family. Chu Qinghuang paused, wondering if the original owner particularly loved the bastard, or because the bastard was easy to bully and could not resist being abducted into the mansion. It took a very short time to recall it in his mind. Qi Ling was originally a bastard of the Zhenbei Palace, and the Zhenbei king was one of the kings of different surnames in Ziki. He once held military power and was very popular. The title of king was hereditary. However, when the emperor ascended the throne and Lin Ao became the regent, the power and status of the Zhenbei Palace were not as good as before. It was severely weakened by the Lin family, and this generation has long lost its former glory. However, a lean camel is bigger than a horse. The Zhenbei king still has the power of 100,000 soldiers and horses in his hands. He is comfortable with his fiefdom. The Zhenbei king is a romantic figure with 7 or 8 legitimate and illegitimate sons. Among them, the eldest legitimate son Qi Yun will undoubtedly be the new king in the future, and Qi Ling is the most outstanding one among the illegitimate sons, which naturally caused Qi Yun's dissatisfaction and fear. When Chu Qinghuang forced Wen Zhan into the palace, Qi Yun saw that she liked handsome men, so in order to please her, he took the initiative to send Qi Ling to Beijing. At this time, Chu Qinghuang looked at Qi Ling's handsome face and always felt that there was something strange. In the original owner's impression, the illegitimate son of the Zhenbei Palace is better at martial arts and strategy than the legitimate son. The legitimate son Qi Yun was afraid of him, so he tried every means to send him to the capital, and managed to let Chu Qinghuang see him, and then he was naturally brought to the princess's mansion. At this time, looking at Qi Ling's demeanor, it is indeed easy to arouse fear. Chu Qinghuang twisted her eyebrows and said lightly, next. The third person who came in was a young man in a blue satin robe. His facial features were relatively plain, not as elegant as Wen Zhan, nor as handsome as Qi Ling, but he looked quite comfortable. He looked about 18 or 19 years old, indifferent and restrained, not too ostentatious. Shen Kongjin, the illegitimate son of the Shen family, greets Her Royal Highness the Princess. Another illegitimate son? Chu Qinghuang took a sip of tea. Next. The last boy who came in was so beautiful that it was unbelievable. He was wearing a red dress that was eye-catching. His eyes were clear and bright, hiding a bit of arrogance. His skin was white and smooth, and his figure was slender and tall. He was obviously the youngest among the four. He was definitely a beautiful boy. This boy was bought by Chu Qinghuang at the auction. His name was Hong Yu. Although he was young, his temper was obviously not very good. Even if he deliberately made an expression of lowering his eyebrows and eyes at this time, he could not hide the rebelliousness that flashed across his face. It was quite interesting. Chu Qing Huang secretly thought that the original owner was very lucky. The servants who were forced into the mansion not only had outstanding looks and demeanor, but also had powerful abilities. In comparison, Feng Jinzi, who was once the only favorite, had some advantages in status, but was completely outdone in other aspects. If it was not arranged by someone with a purpose, she would not believe such a coincidence. Just as he was thinking, a respectful voice came from the corridor outside, "Prince Consort, please be careful and walk slowly." Chu Qing Huang raised his eyes slightly and saw Feng Jinzi walking with the help of a servant. His steps were unsteady, sweat rolled down his pale face, and his eyebrows were tightly knitted, looking particularly painful. The four servants obviously saw Feng Jinzi's white face, and their expressions were all subtle. Chu Qing Huang called the prince consort over today. Was it to torture him intentionally, or did he want to continue to acknowledge his identity, or just beat him and give him a sweet date? Is this abuse or sweet love? Feng Jinzi walked step by step. He was sweating all over after walking a short distance. He really suffered a lot in the past 2 days. His face was pale. Not only did he hurt badly in his back, but his knees also hurt. At this time, he was just holding on and didn't let himself fall down. He had already scolded Chu Qing Huang in his heart. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he resisted the urge to walk into the flower hall, suppressed the urge to yell at Chu Qing Huang, and saluted stiffly towards Chu Qing Huang. "I greet Her Royal Highness the Princess." My Lord Hong Yu lazily reminded, "Her Royal Highness the Princess has been canonized as the eldest princess by the Emperor, so you should say I greet Her Royal Highness the eldest princess." Feng Jinzi's face darkened, and he had to repeat, "I greet Her Royal Highness the eldest princess." "No need to be polite," Chu Qing Huang said indifferently, "Everyone, please sit down." As soon as the voice fell, Hong Yu chuckled. Everyone's eyes turned to him at once. Chu Qing Huang also looked at him expressionlessly. Hong Yu pursed her lips and held back her smile. "Sorry, I just think that the situation of the prince consort is really miserable now, and it may be a bit difficult for him to sit down." Feng Jinzi's face was extremely ugly in an instant. "You are so presumptuous. This young man is not afraid of death." Chu Qing Huang thought calmly, but couldn't help but raised her lips. Fighting for favor in the backyard might be a very interesting drama, which can make this cold mansion more lively, although she knew that these servants were probably not ordinary characters. But it doesn't matter, she can wait slowly, waiting for them to show their true colors one by one. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 27. The servants took their seats one by one. There was a seat left on each side of Chu Qing Huang. The servants were quite tactful and did not approach Chu Qing Huang. Instead, Feng Jinzi's servant naturally helped Feng Jinzi to the seat on Chu Qing Huang's left. Just as he was about to sit down, he heard Chu Qing Huang say, "You sit opposite." Feng Jinzi's body stiffened, and he had to straighten his bent waist. He glared at Chu Qing Huang coldly, "What do you mean?" Chu Qing Huang's eyebrows were slightly cold. "You want to kneel again?" Feng Jinzi gritted his teeth, suppressed his anger, turned around and walked to the empty seat opposite her and sat down. As soon as his buttocks landed on the stool, he shivered in pain and froze his body and dared not move again. 4 pairs of eyes fell on his face. Feng Jinzi endured the burning embarrassment on his face, cursed Chu Qing Huang fiercely in his heart again, and then straightened up and said stiffly, "I will eat standing up." Chu Qinghuang did not speak. It had only been 2 days since Feng Jinzi had received 50 lashes of the board. It was extremely difficult for him to even walk, let alone sit down. Wen Zhan spoke calmly, "The prince consort is delicate. He has probably never been beaten like this in his life. Your Highness should understand that he is seriously injured and allow him to eat while standing." Although his tone sounded extremely gentle, the 4 words delicate were undoubtedly a naked irony to Feng Jinzi at this time. Everything has a first time, and there will be a second time after the first time. Hongyu blinked her innocent eyes. Wait until the prince consort is beaten a few more times and punished to kneel a few more times, he should not be so delicate anymore. Feng Jinzi's eyes suddenly turned cold, staring at Hongyu with a cold and murderous look, as if he wanted to drag him out and beat him to death immediately. What's that look in the eyes of the prince consort? Hongyu was puzzled. Am I wrong? Qi Ling took a sip of the teacup leisurely. You are right, but the prince consort probably doesn't like it. Since I am right, why doesn't the prince consort like it? Because the truth is usually unpleasant to hear. Hongyu said, as if he understood. Feng Jinzi's face turned pale and blue, and he couldn't help but want to lose his temper. These lowly servants, who didn't even have the qualifications to speak in front of him in the past, dared to add insult to injury now. Aren't they afraid of his revenge in the future? Fu Kang Chu Qinghuang seemed not to hear the quarrel between the few people, and said lightly, "Come and sit down." Fu Kang, dressed in black, responded and sat down on the left side of Chu Qinghuang without saying a word. As if they had made an appointment, the 4 servants looked away from Feng Jinzi's face and turned to look at Fu Kang. They thought Chu Qinghuang was unwilling to sit next to others, but they were wrong. Chu Qinghuang just didn't want to sit next to Feng Jinzi. However, when can the personal shadow guard sit with the master to eat? Feng Jinzi's face was so ugly that it was a mixture of shock, anger, humiliation, and sharp resentment that he wanted to kill them in front of him. In view of the fact that the prince consort is unwell, starting from today, all the power of the princess's mansion, except for me, will be handed over to Fu Kang. Chu Qinghuang ordered calmly, "If you have any questions, you can ask Fu Kang." Huh? Hongyu glanced at Fu Kang, frowning slightly. "I heard that Fu Kang is the prince's personal shadow guard, the kind who stays with him all day long. In this way, if we ask him for instructions, isn't it the same as asking the prince for instructions? Asking Chu Qinghuang for instructions is a small matter. What if we disturb the prince's rest or other things, will he be whipped?" Wen Zhan nodded slowly, "It seems to be true." Qi Ling nodded. Shen Zongjin continued to nod. Fu Kang didn't speak, and his silence was like air. "Is there a problem?" Chu Qinghuang looked up at the few people, his tone cold. Wen Zhan was silent for a moment. "No problem." Hongyu hurriedly shook his head. "No problem, I will follow the prince's orders." Shen Zongjin, "No problem." Qi Ling said, "No problem." Chu Qinghuang then coldly announced the start of the meal and said no more. She just announced this decision in public, announcing Fu Kang's new status in the mansion, and the fact that the prince consort had completely lost power. Other things were not important. Although the Dark Chamber has set a rule that the Shadow Guard must stay with her for 12 hours, the rules are dead, but people are alive. What she needs is a strongest Shadow Guard who will follow orders, not a wooden man who only follows rigid rules and does not know how to adapt. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 28. The dinner was very delicate, with a sense of weirdness in the silence. The servant and the shadow player both accompanied Chu Qinghuang to eat, but the prince consort stood up to eat like a child who had made a mistake, and the food tasted like chewing wax. However, there was no doubt that the scenery in front of him was extremely beautiful. Whether it was the shadow player or the servant, the appearance was 1 in 100, and each had its own characteristics, just like the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards of the emperor. Chu Qing Huang even had the mood to think that whether it was a man or a woman, it was natural to love beauty, and no one would hate beautiful things. If such a beautiful scenery was not mixed with conspiracy and calculation, it would probably be better. After the dinner, Chu Qing Huang put down his chopsticks and said lightly, "Wen Zhan stays, and the others go back first." Feng Jinzi was already close to exhaustion, his face was pale, and sweat rolled down his face. Every minute and every second he stayed was tormenting him. Hearing this, he almost wanted to pick up the bowl in front of him and put it on Chu Qing Huang's head. He came here and suffered for half an hour, just to give Chu Qing Huang a chance to establish her authority? Or did she simply want to humiliate him? However, he really didn't have the energy to be angry at this moment. He had been tortured by Chu Qing Huang for the past 2 days and had lost his temper. He could only curse and swear in his heart to vent his dissatisfaction, but how could he vent his anger like this? Feng Jinzi decided to temporarily endure this frustration and settle accounts with Chu Qing Huang after his injuries healed. So Feng Jinzi was quickly helped by the servant to turn around and leave, and the other 3 servants also bowed to Chu Qing Huang and turned around and left leisurely. Soon, only Chu Qing Huang and Wen Zhan were left in the flower hall. Well, there was also Fu Kang, who had returned to stand beside Chu Qing Huang. Jinlan came forward to serve tea, and Chu Qing Huang took the teacup and sipped quietly. Wen Zhan sat for a while and said respectfully, "I wonder why your highness kept me here." Chu Qing Huang raised his eyes, "I heard that you are well educated and good at arithmetic." Wen Zhan was surprised, "Who did your highness hear that from?" Chu Qing Huang was silent and looked at him expressionlessly. Ahem. Wen Zhan cleared his throat, "I am indeed good at arithmetic. You don't have any status in the Wen family." Wen Zhan was silent for a moment and nodded slowly, "Yes. To be precise, he has no status at all, but he doesn't care." Chu Qing Huang took a sip of tea and lowered her eyes and said, "Self-taught. I can't say I'm a talent." "Your highness is overpraising me." Wen Zhan was humble and respectful enough. "It's just that no one cared about me since I was a child, so I could only rely on reading to pass the time. Over time, I accumulated more knowledge." "Did you buy all your books yourself?" Wen Zhan was silent for a moment, as if thinking about how to answer. After a while, he shook his head and said, "I didn't have much money when I was a child, and the books I read were all in the Wen family's study. After that," he added, "when I was young, I was thin and flexible, and I often sneaked into Lord Wen's study alone to read." This answer was half true and half false, but it was not a lie. He did often go to Lord Wen's study to read. As for having no money, this was not entirely correct. He really had no money when he didn't need it, and he would not be forced by money when he needed it. Naturally, he had a way to get money. But as a bastard of the Wen family, he always knew how to keep a low profile and hide his etch. No one noticed. Wen Zhan was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "I was discovered at first and was beaten several times. Later, I gained more experience and was rarely discovered." After saying this, he realized that Chu Qing Huang seemed to be interrogating him. Although her tone sounded the same and the questions she asked were ordinary, like a casual chat, her questioning word by word was very similar to the rhythm of the Ministry of Justice interrogating prisoners. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 29. Chu Qing Huang said, "Do you want to enter the government?" "Enter the government?" Wen Zhan was obviously a little surprised, but he did not refuse immediately. Instead, after briefly thinking about Chu Qinghuang's intention, he asked directly, "Your Highness wants me to enter the government?" Chu Qinghuang did not speak. "In fact, with my knowledge and ability, it is not difficult to enter the government," Wen Zhan pondered, "but there are two problems in front of us. First, Ziki has always had laws that stipulate that the son-in-law cannot enter the government. I am the servant of Her Royal Highness the Princess. Although my status is much humbler than that of the son-in-law, whether it is due to the law or other reasons, I am not qualified to enter the government. If there had been no precedent for the princess to take a concubine, I am afraid that Ziki's law would add another one, that the princess's son-in-law, concubine, and servant cannot enter the government. But a woman like Chu Qinghuang is a rare gem in a century, so there is no need to set up a special rule for her. But the nature is the same. Any princess's man, whether husband or male favorite, is not eligible to enter the government." Chu Qinghuang did not comment on this, and said calmly, "What is the second one?" "Second, my father doesn't like me," Wen Zhan said calmly. "Although the laws of Ziki stipulate that illegitimate sons can also enter the government, there is a rule that legitimate sons are first. If legitimate sons do not enter the government or join the army, illegitimate sons cannot cross the line. On this point, my father will never be lenient to me. And as everyone knows, Wen Li, the legitimate son of the Wen family, is a straw bag embroidered pillow. If he wants to enter the government, his father must find another shortcut for him, such as buying an official position or cheating in the examination room. So the possibility of Wen Zhan entering the government is almost zero." Chu Qinghuang said coldly, "This palace only asked you if you want to, not anything else." Wen Zhan was silent for a moment, stood up and saluted, "Reporting to Your Highness, if Your Highness needs it, I am willing." "If she needs it?" Chu Qinghuang pondered the meaning of his words and asked calmly, "What if I don't need it?" "Then I am willing to live a plain life and not wade into the muddy waters of officialdom." Wen Zhan did not hesitate, "If Your Highness needs it, I have conditions." Chu Qinghuang raised her eyes slightly and looked at the man standing in front of her with an absolutely respectful attitude. She was a little surprised at his boldness. After all, looking at the entire Ziki, there might not be many people who dared to negotiate with Chu Qinghuang, a violent princess. But she didn't say anything and asked casually, "What conditions?" "I can serve Your Highness with my heart and soul, but I only serve Your Highness. Your Highness must ensure that I will no longer be oppressed and constrained by anyone." Wen Zhan said in a steady tone, "I don't have to be bound by anyone in the Wen family. Even if one day I kill my father and brother, Your Highness will have to cover for me." In short, he wants absolute freedom and power under the protection of this princess's mansion, but in front of the princess who can protect him, he will guarantee his absolute loyalty and obedience. "You've sacrificed your life for me, so I'll protect you." Chu Qinghuang raised her eyebrows, "You're brave enough to negotiate with me." Wen Zhan lowered his head, "A timid person is not qualified to work with Her Royal Highness the Princess." Chu Qinghuang was silent for a moment. "Why do you think I have the ability to protect you?" "Based on my intuition." Chu Qinghuang raised her eyebrows and looked at him quietly for a long time, then slowly nodded, "Deal." Wen Zhan's lips curved slightly, he lifted his robe and knelt down, "Thank you, Your Highness, I won't let you down." This kneeling was a pledge of allegiance, a representation of submission, and the beginning of the oath. "Go back and prepare to participate in this year's autumn examination," Chu Qinghuang said calmly. "Your goal is to become the top scholar." "Yes," Wen Zhan agreed, paused for a moment and said, "I have a request." "Go ahead." "In a few days, it will be Lord Wen's 50th birthday. As a son, I should go back to celebrate my father's birthday." Wen Zhan said, "Your Highness, can you go back with me?" Chu Qinghuang nodded, "Yes." "Thank you, Your Highness." Wen Zhan did not ask Chu Qinghuang how to solve the two problems he just mentioned, Whether as the princess's servant or the illegitimate son of the Wen family, he did not have the qualifications to participate in the autumn examination, but there was nothing Chu Qinghuang could not do. If it were someone else, they might also consider the consequences of breaking the rules. And Chu Qinghuang broke more than just one rule. She openly took a concubine and robbed a man from the people, negotiated with the emperor, was disrespectful to the empress dowager, was highly skilled in martial arts and violent, beat the disfavored prince consort whenever she wanted, made him kneel whenever she wanted, and directly proposed to confiscate the family property when the treasury ran out of money. All these things, being unorthodox, is not enough to describe 1/10 or 1/12 of her, and anything else that happened to her, I'm afraid it's not surprising. After lunch, Chu Qinghuang took Fu Kang back to the bedroom. The boy was always silent during the day, following Chu Qinghuang like a shadow. The former rebelliousness was no longer seen, as if he had unconsciously lost his edges and corners. In the obvious change in Chu Qinghuang's attitude, he also became more docile. The whip can make the weak obedient, but it can arouse the pride of the strong, and gentleness can make the strongest people in the world become much softer and more obedient. There is something that is quietly changing in silence. When I went to bed at night, the scene of last night was played out again in front of me. The little shadow guard was shivering in his sleep on his brocade couch, his whole body curled up into a ball, his face was pale and his lips were so white that there was no trace of blood. After Chu Qinghuang was woken up by him, he stood up and stood in front of the bed and looked at it for a long time, wondering whether he should let him continue to tremble like this, or let him occupy half of his bed. What is the cause of his problem? After thinking again and again, Chu Qinghuang reached out to Fu Kang's forehead. Unsurprisingly, as soon as her fingertips touched his skin, his wrist was grabbed by him again. Just like last night, the moment he saw her, Xiaoying Wei turned over neatly and knelt on the ground. This subordinate deserves to die. Chu Qinghuang didn't have any special expression, and just said, "Go and sleep on my bed." Fu Kang subconsciously wanted to say no, but he quickly thought about the rules Chu Qinghuang had set for him, swallowed the sentence of no, and only said yes respectfully. Everything seemed to be the same as last night, from the stiff posture when lying on the bed to shivering under the quilt after falling asleep, to unconsciously reaching out his hands to wrap around her waist, as if it was a script written in advance. Last night was no different. Chu Qinghuang stared at the hand around her waist and secretly decided to find a doctor with superb medical skills to take a look at him earlier. She must find out what caused his problems. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 30. The next morning, Nanny Wu came to ask Chu Qinghuang whether she wanted to go to the Feng family for the banquet. Chu Qinghuang pondered for a moment and nodded slowly, "Go." Yes, Nanny Wu accepted the order respectfully. "I will ask someone to prepare it now." Chu Qinghuang sat in front of the window, thinking quietly. Although Feng Wanyu probably held this flower viewing banquet for her elder brother, there should be many noble ladies invited to go. After all, Feng Wanyu is the daughter of the Prime Minister, and her banquet is naturally attended by many women from official families. Most of these women are known to be dignified and elegant, proficient in piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and their words and deeds are very consistent with the style of ladies from noble families. They don't swing their skirts when walking and don't show their teeth when smiling. It can be seen from this that for Chu Qinghuang, a princess with a bad reputation and nothing to show except martial arts and status, the noble ladies of the aristocratic families are disdainful from the bottom of their hearts. Of course, disdain is disdain, but it is also true that they are afraid of Chu Qinghuang. So today's banquet should be very interesting. Chu Qing Huang thought so and got up to change her clothes. A fitted bright red-waisted long skirt outlined her slender figure. The dark patterns on the skirt were gorgeous and noble. The cuffs and hem were embroidered with phoenixes with wings spread in gold thread. The whole dress was not too extravagant, but it exuded a nobleness that could not be ignored. Her waist was so thin that it could not be grasped, but she was not delicate at all. Instead, she was a capable and neat beauty. The color at the corner of her eyes was cold and her face was gorgeous. She was not as violent and impetuous as before, but had an indescribable temperament. Fu Kang looked at her silently, and he became more and more determined that the prince was really different from before. It was like a different person from the inside out, which made him feel at ease. He walked out of the gate of the princess's mansion and got on the carriage to the Feng family. When he arrived outside the gate of the Feng family, Chu Qing Huang found that there were not many people outside the gate, except for the servants of the Feng family. There were no other noble ladies coming in and out. Chu Qing Huang didn't say anything and got off the carriage. With a cry of "The princess has arrived," the servants in front of the Feng family knelt down one after another. Madame Feng, Feng Wanyu, and the maids of the Feng family respectfully welcomed the princess in the middle courtyard. After walking through the wide front yard and arriving at the middle courtyard, Jinlan saw the respectful attitude of Madame Feng and her daughter in the yard, and reminded coldly, "Your Highness has been canonized as the princess, and the title and status are equal to the queen. Wherever you go, the subjects must pay homage with great ceremony. Madame Feng, do you not know the rules, or are you deliberately neglecting it?" The voice fell, like a cold wind blowing in the face. Madame Feng's face changed, and she was about to reprimand Jinlan for taking advantage of the power of others, but her eyes met Chu Qing Huang's cold eyes, and she felt cold all over her body in an instant. Thinking of the suffering Jinzi had suffered in the princess's mansion in the past 2 days, she gritted her teeth and cursed Chu Qing Huang in her heart, thinking that she was barely pretending. Didn't she call her mother every time she came to the Feng family before? She started to put on airs just after she was canonized as the princess. Madame Feng said coldly, "I am talking to His Highness, is it your turn as a servant to interrupt?" Jinlan frowned, "Madame Feng, what you said is right. If I were someone else's servant, I would never dare to interrupt Madame Feng. But Madame Feng's address is wrong, the etiquette is wrong, and the rules are neglected. As the servant of the eldest princess, I have the responsibility to remind Madame Feng. Do you think that the maid is wrong?" Madame Feng's face changed, but her eyes were looking at Chu Qing Huang, forcing herself to show a kind smile. "Qing Huang, you used to be the closest to me. Every time you come to the Feng family, I treat you as my own daughter. The hierarchy should not be messed up," Chu Qing Huang said in a light tone. "Madame Feng does not need to try to get close to me." Madame Feng's expression froze, and she almost bit her gums to pieces. If this woman was her daughter-in-law, if she was just an ordinary noble lady from an aristocratic family, the daughter-in-law that Jinzi married into the family, she would definitely teach her the rules of respecting her mother-in-law. Madame Feng was filled with hatred, but she dared not show any disrespect on her face. She froze for a moment, and then obediently followed the rules of a court lady to pay respect to the princess. Feng Wanyu naturally did not dare to be arrogant, and immediately followed and performed the ceremony respectfully. No need to be polite. Chu Qing Huang walked inside. Today was a banquet for the women, and Prime Minister Feng had not returned from court. The guards on duty in the mansion were all kneeling at their posts, and no man dared to take the initiative to step forward, except for Fu Kang, who was following Chu Qing Huang. After Feng Wanyu stood up, she quickly followed Chu Qing Huang and said, "Your Highness, my elder brother." "He won't die," Chu Qing Huang said indifferently. "After a few days, when his injuries are better, you can go and bring him back." Feng Wanyu choked, "Bring him back? What?" Chu Qing Huang tilted her head to look at her. "Didn't Chu Yuling tell you that I want to divorce Feng Jin?" Feng Huanyu's face changed slightly, and she forced a smile and said, Your Highness, are you joking? My elder brother and Your Highness are a couple who have worshipped heaven and earth. How can you divorce her husband? There are many families of officials and common people who divorce their wives and marry new ones. Why can't I divorce Feng Jinzi? Chu Qinghuang sneered coldly. Your elder brother is the son of the emperor, can't he be divorced? With a plop, Feng Huanyu knelt down with a pale face. Your servant doesn't mean that, Your Highness, Your Highness. Mrs. Feng was also confused when she heard this, but she had eaten rice for a few more years after all, and she said unhappily, Your Highness, the princess. Chu Qinghuang turned his eyes slightly and looked at her coldly and calmly. The princess insisted on marrying Jinzi, and now you insist on divorcing Jinzi, totally disregarding the pride and dignity of the legitimate son of a noble family. Can you humiliate others at will by relying on your status? Madame Feng had a clear look of anger on her face. If Your Highness bullies people like this, I can only ask for justice from the Queen Mother. Chu Qinghuang looked at her silently, her eyes as deep and cold as a cold pond. The air became cold for no reason. Madame Feng's scalp numbed when she looked at her, and she couldn't help but feel a chill from the solace of her feet. She said calmly, Why doesn't Your Highness speak? Isn't what I said true? Chu Qinghuang looked at her calmly, her face was cold, and she looked like a beautiful but emotionless ice sculpture, with a cold current surging around her body. Feng Huanyu was so frightened that she dared not breathe, fearing that she would whip out the whip and hit her the next second. After an unknown amount of time, Chu Qinghuang finally lowered her eyes, brushed her sleeve slowly, and said in a calm voice, It seems that Madame Feng doesn't take me seriously at all. Madame Feng's face suddenly changed, and she suddenly thought of Chu Qinghuang's reputation for brutality and cruelty. I don't have this idea. As soon as she opened her mouth, her momentum weakened by 3 points. I don't have this idea. Chu Qinghuang raised her lips. You are going to complain to the Queen Mother about me, and you still dare to say that you don't have such an idea. Do you think I am a fool? Madame Feng's expression became more and more pale. She didn't think Chu Qinghuang was a fool, but she thought she was a lunatic. Do you know what the will cannot be violated means? Chu Qinghuang's tone was extremely calm. My marriage with Feng Jinzi was granted by the imperial decree. What did Madame mean by what she said just now? Is it to express dissatisfaction with the imperial decree? Madame Feng said anxiously, I don't mean that at all.